Thank you again for showing up for another episode of Boss Up with Mr. Key with your host, Andre Key. And we have a pretty interesting guest today. If you don't know it about me, I'm really into historical events. The Kingdom of Mansa Musa, Genghis Khan, Game 6, Michael Jordan, Utah Jazz. But today's guest is also a part of some historical events in U.S. history and is also the owner of Ankerstar Wealth. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest, Steve Ankerstar. Hey, Steve, thank you for showing up today. Appreciate it.
Hey, Andre, you bet. Love being here and listening to your show, and I'm ready to boss up with Andre, and let's go.
Just to kind of kick it all off, man, tell us where it all began. Like, where were you walking around in diapers?
Well, there you go. Well, I was a military brat. So what that means is, I was all over the place. I was actually adopted. My parents tried to have kids, couldn't have kids. So I was adopted. I was born in Mobile, Alabama. And then, bounced around to Florida, out to California, D.C., Iowa, and then into Cincinnati for kind of what I would call the formative years. And, it was interesting. A military kid is generally pretty, since they have all these different experiences, pretty grounded for, a lot of different scenarios that they've seen. It started with, kindergarten in California at an all white school. And then the DC experience, basically, we had segregation going on, the initiatives of the 70s. Reverse segregation. In this case, I'm, a white child.
DC was white chocolate city.
Well,
right?
it was an all black school that I went to for first and second grade. And, the beauty about kids is you don't know any different, right? You're just like, okay,
we're just trying to meet friends. And
there you go.
What do we have in common?
And then I leave there and go to Iowa, which is 100% the other way. So bounced around, ended up in Cincinnati where, my dad was an ROTC instructor there.
Queen City.
So I identify Cincinnati as home until I moved to Texas. And now that I've lived here longer than there, that's, identify as a Texan now, imported Texan.
Imported Texan. I mean, especially in Austin, there's a lot of imported Texans here.
There really is. And we'll get to that. But Austin's a very unique and amazing place. And we wouldn't rather be anywhere else. And we love it here.
Got it. So let's go back. Let's talk about high school. Which state were you in high school at?
So by the time I got to high school, I'm in Cincinnati.
Okay.
So, 3-sport athlete, it had to switch a little bit. It was football, basketball, and baseball growing up. Got to high school. I grew, I'm 6'5". I finished 8th grade. I was 6 foot tall. And then I started high school 3 months later. I was 6'5".
Man, you got lucky.
And I got lucky. Thank you. And I wouldn't trade being tall for anything in the world. But growing 5 inches in 3 months, I couldn't walk. So
I was going to say,
I went from being pretty good at every, the sports. Well, I was good because I was tall. I'll give it, I'll say that. I mean, it's its own advantage. But certainly, I went from, pretty good athlete to where, high school is looking forward to getting me. And then I show up and I can hardly walk.
I can barely tie your shoes.
Yeah, I was the baby giraffe on roller skates or trying to walk on ice or something. And so I was able to kind of continue on in basketball, but absolutely loved, the Cincinnati area.
Oh, nice.
They're fans just like anywhere, but the Bengals fans are a little insane and
the Reds.
Love it. And the Reds, this is the 70s, right? So the Big Red Machine was going on. So it was really a great place to grow up.
Let me find out about, so obviously it was you in Cincinnati. It's kind of like where you're grounded at. What was the sibling dynamic? You're the oldest, only child?
Yeah. So I'm an only child. So since I was adopted, my parents were, adopted in, I was born in 1969. So, by the time they couldn't have, figured out they couldn't have kids and they got me, then they're like, okay, one's enough. So I grew up in an interesting dynamic being an only child.
Yeah.
And I tell, when somebody says, we just have one child, I kind of give the joke. It's kind of not a joke, but I said, well, I was an only child and I turned out okay. Because there is a little different dynamic when there's just one child and you get the full attention of both parents.
Yeah.
I would say that that's one of the benefits I had. But I can also I've seen scenarios where the only child turns into a menace to society, right?
Yeah,
because they're spoiled. They always have everything and
everything's about them. It's so self-centered.
Yeah,
right?
they never had to fight for anything from a sibling. And the first time I realized the only child dynamic was when I got to college and I ordered a pizza, and I lived in a fraternity. So I ordered a pizza, which,
Right.
I'd ordered food before. It's not in itself a big deal. But when I got it, I was just like, hey, I'm going to, this is for me, and I'm going to eat a little bit today, and, I'm going to save the rest for tomorrow.
Yeah.
That did not fly. Everybody's like, cool, you ordered pizza, and everybody started reaching into it. I was like, no.
They say frat brothers like, hey, we're brothers.
Like, what's going on here? But yeah, only child. So it was just me. Grew up in the country there in Ohio.
Okay,
And,
good.
Yeah.
Did your dad in the summers like have you in the fields like shucking corn or?
Well, my dad he retired from the Air Force as well, and we'll get to it. I know, but then I went in the Air Force. But and he knew that from early on I was doing really pretty good in school, and he knew I wanted to kind of go into the Air Force, be an engineer, all those sorts of things, which I did. But he also was pretty good at wanting to teach me the lessons of life. So, in my teen years, I started kind of cutting grass. And then one summer, he said, you're going to bale hay. And I was like, me? Talking to him. And he's like, yeah. So I don't know, $4 an hour or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It was a lot of money back then. But yeah, so I baled hay for a little bit. And, and he said, these are motivators for you to do good in school, because you know what? You don't want to be doing this when you're 30, 40 or 50. And I said, I don't want to be doing it right now. And then my first real job in high school was working at a golf course, and I was a maintenance guy, which sounds cool until you realize that means you go around and clean the toilets.
I did something different. I had to like switch where the holes were at on the putting greens. Like I didn't know they did that.
That was like levels above where I was, right? So maybe if I worked for there for 2 to 3 years, I could get up to.
It was community service. It didn't last. Great. So I want to kind of go back just a little bit, because obviously you're in the financial investment world. Did you get any gems at that point in life from your parents or school, or maybe that came along later in life?
I did. I was very fortunate in the fact that our school, Lebanon High School, a little shout out there, they taught a course in your freshman year called Essentiology. But yeah, you're right. That's most people's reaction is, it was how to balance, the idea of a checkbook and a bank account, and just because you have checks doesn't mean you have money, and how to write a check, and the idea of, in a car, buying a car. We both have girls that I know your daughter has a car. My youngest doesn't yet, but getting there.
It's coming.
Teaching, things that like gas costs money and insurance and kind of how all that works. And part of that was investing, and it was more of the basic time value of money. If you start early and do a little bit, later on you'll be your older self will thank your younger self. So we had that. And I also had a math teacher that was really good about he also sold insurance on the side. I didn't realize that at the time, but was good with the time value of money. So he sat me in front of this chart, and he's like, this is really the eighth wonder of the world. And I'm a math guy. I looked at it and went, yeah, absolutely. Just start young, right?
Yeah. I try to explain the time value of money to my clients. It's like, I just want to wait until the prices go up, but then the prices of the other houses that you have to get into are going to go up. Like, it's kind of a wash. Like the time value of money, it doesn't mean that when your price goes up, like you'll have this cash and the inflation doesn't keep up with what you're trying to buy. So that's a good principle. I like that one.
Yeah.
All right, good. So in high school, playing sports, you had this class, which is key. I think that should be a part of the curriculum now. I don't think it is.
It isn't. I haven't heard of any place that has it, but it was really worthwhile.
Yeah, that was huge. So you decided to go to the Air Force. It sounds like, hey, your dad was in the Air Force, and that was probably something that influenced you to go?
Well, I would say I was kind of drafted. And people are like, well, they haven't had a draft.
I was about to say, man, you're really showing your age, right?
You haven't had a draft since Vietnam. And I'm like, well, unless your dad's in the military, then sometimes you get drafted, right? You know what I mean?
I thought it was like the only child couldn't get drafted or something. You had to have at least another brother or something.
Right? Well, yeah, those are the rules. But my dad, he said, hey, come in to, take high school ROTC.
Okay.
And if you do well and your grades are up, you can get a scholarship that way. And I'm like, I like money. And he's like, yeah, you can go to school for free and then go on into the Air Force. And I'm like, all of that sounds good. And there's no commitment to go into high school ROTC. The only challenge is when you're, kind of popular and athletic and, you're wearing a uniform, there can be some negative peer pressure from your friend group. But, if people that are well adjusted, understand and respect that people like different things. So I was having to wear a uniform in high school and dealing with, a little bit of jabs from my, especially the athlete buddies.
Right. Yeah. The jocks, man.
But yeah, it worked out. So, that planted the seeds for going into the military service. And then as completely pathetic as this is, there were two formative things from high school that literally changed my life to this point today. And I speak quite a bit. So, and I always talk about, there was a show called Family Ties, which I don't know if you're
Family
old enough
Ties,
to remember.
with Fred Savage, or what was his name?
Yeah, Alex P. Keaton was the young investor. It was Michael J. Fox was the actor.
Okay, that one. Yeah. Okay.
So he carried, he's a nerd in high school carrying a briefcase and a Wall Street Journal. And, I just heard all this math about time value money. And if I just start putting away, $25 now, that's going to be mega millions later on. And I'm like, well, I want all that. So let's do that.
Right.
So I was convinced that I was going to go to college. I wanted to be an engineer and I was good at math. So I'm like, I'm going to do engineering and then math and then go into finance instead of taking finance. It was just kind of a weird way to get to it. And then so that was what I was going to do until my junior year of high school. I went to the movie theater with my friend, not thinking anything was going to change that night. And I saw Top Gun. And I walked out of Top Gun. I was in awe the whole movie, the original.
Yeah.
Top Gun 2 was pretty good too. We had a client event last year where I brought a bunch of folks in. But yeah, I saw the Top Gun and I walked out of the theater and I turned to my buddy Mike, best friend from high school, and I said, dude, that's what I want to do the rest of my life. And you can imagine what happened then. He laughed.
All right.
He's like, yeah, sure, whatever, dude. I went home and told my parents, and even though my dad was in the Air Force, he never got to fly.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, in the position you are as a parent, right? You want to motivate your kids, and for the parents out there, you want to do your best to motivate your kid, but your biggest block as a parent is you see them as the diaper wearing little kid.
Did he have doubt? Sometimes you doubt your kids, like, you can't do
it's
that.
It's just one of those. He's like, Steve, you're an amazing kid. I'm like, oh, here we go. Right? You're an amazing kid and you're really smart. And he goes, I've worked with fighter pilots and it's just like that's really tough to get to do, which is, kind of that veiled, I don't think that's going to be your future. But, he was in the Air Force, so they were supportive and they let's go. Right.
Let's join the Air Force and see what happens.
And a bunch of people, I started telling people about it, like, I'm going to be a fighter pilot and, I'm 17 and it took a few years later to finally get there, but I did eventually.
You spoke it into fruition. So you joined the Air Force. Like, how was that journey becoming, basic training to being able to be a fighter? Fly a plane.
Yeah. So it's a little different for officers. So when most people think the military, you go off to basic training. For the Air Force, it's down in San Antonio. And then that's how when you join right out of high school. And you go right into the enlisted corps and go off.
You went right into officer training?
So I did. So I went to college first.
Okay, there you go.
So my grades were good and we applied for an Air Force scholarship and got it. So I ended up going to Iowa State to college. And then from there I was commissioned and got into flight school after that. So it's kind of a longer path. So, 22 years old or so is when I'm stepping out the door and actually now trying to compete to get into to flight training. But at that point, you're paid a little bit better. I got my engineering degree.
Right.
And then I was ready to hey.
Whoa, hold on. How many years? How long did it take you to get your engineering degree? They told me 5 years.
Yeah, 4.5 was the fastest we could do it. But the best part, it was all paid for. So for folks out there considering military service, a little bit of a shout out is there's lots of money there for education, whether it's enlisted or officer. So pursue that, especially if money's a concern. If you're lazy and don't want to go to school, then it doesn't matter if the money's there or not. But if you're trying to kick and scream and do whatever you can to get there, it's a great way to at least start in the military and let them pay for a lot of your education. You can figure out what you want to do with your life later on.
Perfect. So, all right, man. You sitting in the cockpit of a plane. You're 6'5". Yeah, I saw Top Gun too, and Tom Cruise is probably like 5'3". Like,
yeah, if that, right?
How'd you fit in one of those?
So not very well is the big picture. There was you go in and there's height requirements, and you can be too short or too tall.
Right.
So I was out in California, and I was going through my flight physical. I'd already gotten picked up for flight training, because you apply with a board, so it's a paper review, right? A folder of grades and work performance and stuff like that. And then you write here's why I want to be a pilot. My boss had done great work for her, so he hand wrote the application, and basically, Lance Lord, thank you, changed my life by you handwriting that application and got me in the door. They picked 18 of us out of 400 and some to get in, and so I had to go through the physical, and I walk in. And the person that was helping me was really pretty short, around, she's probably 5'2" or so. Or, it's tough because everybody's kind of short to me. But, so her job is, height, weight, all that stuff. Right. And she goes to measure me, and,
you have to get a step stool.
Well, it's the old school, right? You have the thing and the flap comes down or whatever. So I kind of said, I'm like, hey, I can just tell you if you want. She's like, oh, yes, please, sir. And so I'm like, I'm 6'4". So she wrote that down, 6'4", and kind of like, well, just barely above 6'4". And so I get down to flight school. I walk in the door, and the guy checking us in kind of is looking at my folder, and he's like, 6'4", huh? And I'm like, yes, sir. He goes, all right, 2 measurements matter. Your sitting height, so you can get the canopy closed, and then the bone that goes from your hip to your knee. That can only be so long, because if you have to eject out of the airplane,
you get stuck.
You don't want to get cut off your knees, right? Leave your shins in the airplane.
Oh no!
So I measured both those, and he goes, "You're right at the certain point that you can
just
go."
Met it.
So I just made it. I was maxed out on both, which was just fortunate. There are some waivers. Chad Hennings played football for the Cowboys. There are certain planes that if you are outside of the normal measurements, they can fit you in. And Chad Hennings was a lineman for the Cowboys, so he's like 6'7", 300. So he flew in the A-10. So the A-10 has the one cockpit he could fit in. And if you're on the short side, helicopters are your best option. You can't fly fighters, but if you're for something, you can still fly helicopters. It just kind of works out that way.
So with the fighter, I mean, I've taken some pilot lessons, and it's like you have to be a scientist, a weatherman. You have to be, have some rhythm to be able to move the gears. What type of training did you have to go through for that?
Well, I speak to kids a lot, and what I like to tell them, and they only listen to 1/3 of it, but I say you have to be, to set yourself up for success in a dynamic environment that's fast paced, where you have to be in shape. And flying a fighter is a lot like boxing. You train and you train and you train, but when it's time to kill or be killed, it's like a boxing match of intensity, right? So I said, okay, kids, here's how to be a fighter pilot: is you got to be good at sports. You got to be really good at school, heavy emphasis on math, and you have to be really good at video games. So, of course, what do kids hear?
Video games.
They go home and tell their parents, Mom, Dad, this guy at school, he's really cool. He's a fighter pilot. He told me I need to be playing video games all the time. It's like, that's not what I said.
Right.
You know it. But yeah, it's hand-eye coordination and, physical. Used to be in pretty peak shape. And it's intense. It's boring most of the time, but when you get to the actual mission itself, it's super intense. And again, your life's on the line, and you're the only one in the airplane. So it's
you have to be able to stay. You're a smooth, laid back guy. Like, you had to be able to stay calm during those situations, I bet.
Part of it is you train so hard that you do not. You kind of train out your emotions.
You don't even think about it.
You're just, what to do, and you're just trying to do it as best as you can and as fast as you can, and trying to outreact the other guy. Right. So there's really not of emotions involved in it. We'll parlay it later, but when folks talk about investing, emotions are generally your worst nightmare. Right, you're getting emotionally involved in what you saw on CNBC or something, and you make a stupid move. That's the same thing. If you and I are out there fighting, I'm doing the best I can, but I'm really waiting for you to make a mistake. And as soon as I can see a mistake, I'm going to capitalize on that mistake. And if that ends the fight, then that ends the fight. We call it good, right? So you got to pay laser-like attention, for every second along the way.
All right. So I started this conversation with saying, hey, some historical events. I'm sure you've taken part in some historical events. I know the story, but shock and awe. That's a historical event for the United States, Iraq. Tell us your part that you played in that.
Sure. Shock and awe to stage set a little bit. That's 20 years ago this week, which is why it's kind of been in the news lately, and I've done a few interviews this week. But to stage set for everybody, if you remember 9/11, everybody knows where they were. Here's some planes hitting towers. All of a sudden, it becomes apparent that it's a terrorist attack, right? And so it's not just a bad day. It's an attack on the United States, which we haven't seen since anybody's really. Most people weren't alive.
Pearl Harbor,
right? So 41. So it's a big deal, and U.S. being who they are, and the military being who they are, it's like somebody did this. So it's like I'm ready to kick some butt, and
we need to act fast.
Who's it going to be? So I went home that day, packed my bags, and they said, "Hey, come back, and we'll let you know where you're going to avenge this attack." Right? So some time goes by, with terrorist organizations, they all take credit for it, for credibility, right? So everybody but the guys who did it are raising their hands saying we did it, and it's like, well, we know you didn't do it.
Yeah,
so
we had to
you wish we would come give you the credibility of kicking your butt, right?
Right.
So anyhow, so a year goes by or so, then you start. President Bush was in the younger one was in office at the time. Started doing, he started hearing talk about axis of evil, which Iraq was part of that, and then Saddam Hussein had to go because he had weapons of mass destruction that he was using against his own people. And then the most respected military person that I've ever met, Colin Powell, takes the stage at the United Nations and says this is a slam dunk case. And, if he says it, it's got to be true.
We have to go.
So in we go, and we go to remove Saddam Hussein from power. And historically, that it didn't turn out what we thought was true wasn't true. And those are how things work. But won't go into the politics of that.
Not
but
this time.
My personal, how did I get involved? I was flying the F-117 stealth fighter at the time, which is this little triangle airplane that's stealth. It goes in and you poke the eyes and ears out. It's like the kicker on a football team. You're the first one out there, first one to touch the ball. And you go downtown over large cities and poke out the command centers and surface to air missiles, stuff like that. And since I was flying that, I had flown that for a while. I was already an instructor in the airplane. I was one of the valued leaders, if you will. And they picked a lineup to go overseas. So we went overseas. And then out of that lineup, a subset was to who gets to go in on night one.
Wow.
So very fortunate to have dedicated my life to getting really good in the airplane. So I made the list. And through a whole series of events, I ended up being the first one in to drop the first bomb.
Wow. Man, that's like... I don't know, man. I mean, obviously, destruction and war is something, but it's necessary. And sometimes, man, did you get a piece of shrapnel or something that you got hanging in your wall just to show?
Well, I do. I'll out on my personal Facebook page. One of the things that pilots do, especially if you drop bombs, is you have a piece of chalk right there, and you get to write on the actual bomb, and you can write a little choice message if you want, to the enemy. Irene and I, which I know Irene, we're only dating at the time.
Oh, okay.
So I put "For You, Irene" on the front of the first bomb, and then at the bottom, I was a big Pulp Fiction fan growing up, so I put Ezekiel 25:17, the path of the righteous man. So I wrote that on the front of the bomb, and then the crew chiefs, the other folks, get behind the first ring, get to write all kinds of choice phrases, most of which aren't ready for public consumption.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
But so we write on these bombs, and then when a bomb releases from the airplane, the bomb leaves, and the way it activates is there's a cable that basically pulls the fuse, and that's what the pilots keep from their bombing missions. Is you have that little cable. Flew in. Night one, took out a command center in an underground bunker. Flew night two, had some problems with the airplane, so I couldn't get in and drop my weapons that night. And then night three, took out a palace. If you remember, the palaces were out over the water. There was one road out. There were two of them, and we were supposed to take out both of them. I took mine out with two bombs. Smithereens. It was pretty unique to see from the air. Wow, and then it was a show of force target. It was just telling Saddam Hussein, it's like, look, we asked you to leave power voluntarily. Now we're going to show you.
We mean business.
Show you that, you don't want to inspire the United States to take away your toys, because we will. But then the other one, a bomb went through the roof, but it didn't explode. So the Army, actually, I should say the ground forces, used that as their headquarters. They're like, wait, don't blow that up. That's too cool. So nice. So they used the other one for headquarters there.
Nice. So, okay. So you spent your time, and that's definitely like, I don't know too many people that have experienced that. So you did 20 years. How many years did you do?
I did a full 20.
20, retired.
Retired, so I get the retirement pay. So they don't pay you a tremendous amount in the military. You're comfortable. I don't want to complain about military pay. You always have what you need. But you certainly aren't on a path to move up the social chain, if you will.
The rest is on you once you leave and you get that little boost or monthly stipend or whatever, retirement.
So you get, you don't get paid a lot, but you do get paid for the rest of your life if you serve a full 20. And the rules have started to change now to loosen that up. But in my day, everybody stayed to the 20-year point, whether you wanted to or not. But I will say that, towards the end of my career at my, I got to be a squadron commander, and after that, I still had about a year and a half left, and that's when I started mentally transitioning to what I really wanted to do out in the real world. So
getting out into the real world. Did you take a job right away, or did you?
I did not. So in true Andre boss up mentality, I'd gotten to be a boss in the military. And it's all structured, and you're kind of appointed as the boss. You're not creating it from scratch like entrepreneurs, and they start by themselves, then they build a team and try to put a mission and vision out there and have the team buy into that. And then whether it's a product or service, you're making something that the world wants, and then you have a client base and you treat them like family, and all of that. I didn't have that experience, but I wanted to once I left the military, I wanted to give it a shot. And, I wanted to start my own business. I knew I wanted to invest. At this point, I've been a lifelong investor. So, 25 years since I started in high school. So that $25 a month that my math teacher kind of said I should start with had grown significantly.
What'd you put it into? Like just savings or an investment? Or
I started with USAA mutual funds. Way back in the day. And somewhere in there, I transitioned out of mutual funds into individual stocks because they're a little more efficient, less fees, that sort of thing. And I just kept at it and kind of grew into. So I was really financially independent when I, hit age 43, and I'm like, I really don't have to work again, but that's not me as a person. I love to work. Andre
would be like 40 pounds heavier just sitting around.
Right. What would I do all day? So I wanted to, what I call, and then I have to credit a friend of mine, Matt Bentley, for saying this in an interview, is, betting on yourself. And it's like, that's exactly what I've been trying to say, but I didn't know the words. I wanted to bet on myself. In the military, I was limited by Congress on how much we're paid, and you could only move through the ranks so fast. And I love working. I love grinding. It's like, let's do this, but it didn't mean more pay. Whether I worked 12 hours or 16 hours a day, the pay was the same, and or 4 hours a day. And some people were doing that. So I wanted to get out into the real world where I wasn't under the protection of being told what to wear and what to do every day. And see if I could make it. And I told Irene, because most of my friends went off to fly airlines. We're pilots. I've got multi-million-dollar training. I can go fly an airline. I went and got my license to fly airliners just in case.
You can Delta, United.
So my buddy from United's like, dude, you got to do this. It's the best job ever. And you make good money, which you do. And it was I wanted to go out, and I'm like, I don't want to do that because that to me would be boring. And so a couple of my fighter pilot buddies have said, it's the greatest job in the world for about 3 days. and then you get to hang out in an airport, which, everybody's got their special airport personality. So I told, I didn't tell Irene. I asked Irene, we decided as the team, I was like, here's what I'd like to do. I want 3 years. And I want to start my own business. It's just going to be me. I'm going to work from the house. I'm going to be a financial planner and an investment advisor, and I'm going to see if I can grow this business until my salary, it exceeds what I would have made being an airline pilot. And I said, if I fail, which I don't think I'll fail, obviously I wouldn't do it. And, I have a strong track record of not failing. I go, but I don't know this. I can't guarantee, that I succeed. And for all the entrepreneurs out there, you don't know, but don't let that slow you down. Just keep going, do what you think you should do. Don't wait for perfect information. Just get up every day and go for it.
Just go for it.
And you know what? What I know now, and it worked out well, and I was able to do all that. Now I've got 5 people working for me, and build it out into a true business, if you will. But from all the other entrepreneurs that I know and help invest, it's like you only have to get there once.
You only have to get there once.
You can fail along the way, and that's okay.
Right.
And entrepreneurs are the best at something doesn't work out, and they're like, okay. and off to something else.
Right.
Where a lot of people in society that haven't had that experience, that's if they fail, that they take it personally.
Yeah, they're ready to so the world is over.
Right.
But I always say, like, I always say, hey, success is basically like a pot of gumbo, right? There's a lot of different ingredients, but the two ingredients that I feel like works for most entrepreneurs is consistency and persistence. You sprinkle a little bit of that on whatever your system is and adjust along the way, but keep at it. You're going to yield something out of it. And a lot of times it equals success.
Yeah, I like that. I say it a little bit differently. I talk about, long-term, a lot of people are really good at the long-term goal setting. Like Andre's like, I want to be a super successful real estate agent. Right. It's like, okay, good. Right. But it's what are the 10,000 steps or 10,000 hurdles is what I call them, because I used to run hurdles and track back in the day. Not a big fan, but each one's a threat and each one can take you out. So, when folks are setting a goal as an entrepreneur, it's like you want to, my daughter Allison, who's a freshman at the University of Alabama, her ultimate goal, she wants to run a hotel someday with our last name on it, Ankerstar Hotel. And I said, well, that's great. It's good to have vision. Mm-hmm. There's 10,000 steps between where you are now and that point. And how do you, persist and knock them down every single day to make the big dream a reality? And you can't be deterred along the way. One thing I learned from, and I can't remember who it was, but I was listening to a podcast and he was telling the story. And I've done this to folks that are like, hey, you've built a successful business from scratch. Can I buy you lunch? Right. And so we go out on lunch and they tell me, I'm like, well, tell me your plan. What's your plan? And then as soon as they're done, I say, you shouldn't do that. You're not the right person for this.
Whoa.
and they, of course, they look at me just like that. And then I say, okay, I didn't mean that. Right. But I want you to reflect on what was your initial reaction. Smart. When I said that, did you say, holy crap, this guy that I respect, that, at least enough to just told me I shouldn't do this. He's like, well, maybe he's right. I'll go off and do something else. I'm like, okay, that's not good. If you said that guy's a jerk, F him.
My mindset was like, I'll show him.
Right. It's just like, okay, then move on. I go, I presented a artificial hurdle for you just to see how, if you would let some guy who you don't really know say some words to you, and if that knocks you off your dream, you need to kind of think about that. Focus
how bad do you really want it, right?
Right. Because this was just some made up thing that I just off the cuff said, no, you shouldn't do it. And you're like, what? But if that pissed you off and you're like, okay, this guy is not what I thought he was. I need to get back to my dream and move on. I'm like, you're going to be fine.
Good. So, let me ask you this. And speaking of challenges and hurdles, as you coined the phrase, what was that key moment? I'm sure in your business or establishing it, there was a time where you're on the edge of the bed and telling Irene, like, I don't know. Did you have that point, or was it just up and up when you first started?
I had three things that happened that I took very personally and changed who I was eventually. And, in a perfect world, it'd be one thing, right? You'd not get one thing and you would change and become super aggressive. And pretty much after that point, you would change your life to make things happen.
Right.
Nope. It took three. So it's like, okay, if you've had a couple of setbacks, don't sweat it. Right. The first one is I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. Couldn't get in. Or didn't get in. I got put on the wait list. So I was a senior in high school, put on the wait list, and then, final 5 alternate, and they offered me the prep school. And I was like, no, that's not for me. And I was really mad about that. I'm like, I thought I had done everything I could. Now I know that, and like with our kids, it's like, Dad, I'm doing everything I can. And that they have they're not even halfway to their potential, right?
It's early.
But they think they are, right? Well, I was that guy. So I didn't get that. And then when I got to college, there's a, command structure amongst cadets, and I was the favorite to be the wing commander. And I still don't know exactly why to the day they picked somebody else over me. But I viewed that as, maybe I don't need to take things for granted. I need to fight, play through the whistle, run through the finish line. And it was just like, I didn't get that. And I was really mad about it. And then, both of those were just me not putting forth the work. The third one was I got picked up for pilot training. And this is what I would say holds back, for the new entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs that are listening to this. I almost lost my dream because I couldn't make a mental transition. And what I mean by that is I had worked as a maintenance officer for a couple of years in the Air Force. I didn't go to pilot training right away. Had to what I call work for a living before I got to fly for a living, which doesn't seem like a job. But I was out there and I was doing great work, and I'd risen to the top of my field at a young age. And then I got into pilot training. And when I started my pilot training and I put a flight suit on, and this is the exact transition that I struggled with. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a maintenance officer wearing a flight suit.
Wow.
I did not see a pilot. And since I wasn't able to project myself into the future there of, okay, I'm a pilot now. Right. I struggled, and it was all self-confidence, and it was all self-induced. It was 100% created by me. And here's somebody that was pretty successful who was struggling with that. So just because you're good at something else, when you make that transition, people call it like imposter syndrome, or things like that you hear in the entrepreneurial self-help world. That's real. And it wasn't. I almost washed out of the flight screening program, and one of my good friends who I went through the program with, his name's Joe, and everybody, there were 40 of us or so in the class, and like most of them graduated on time and went on. There were 3 of us that had to stay until Monday to do an extra ride, which he certainly, in Joe's mind, he was like, Steve's a nice guy, but the guy can't fly to save his life. And at the point that was true, but it was all mental. And I walked in that Monday and I flew the ride and I flew the sortie, and it was terrible. And I landed, and the instructor at the time said, I know you have the raw skill. You just got something going on upstairs.
You got a blockage. Like
an athlete in a slump or anything. He's like, I know you've got the skill. And he said, so at the end of the sortie, you have a ground evaluation, which is supposed to be like half an hour long, and they test your knowledge. And he's like, you a gambling man? And I'm like, well, I'm not a gambling man. What are you talking about? And he said, I can ask you one question, or I can ask you all the normal questions. And if I ask you one question, if you get it right, you'll go to pilot training. If you get it wrong, you're out. I said, I'll take the one question. That's kind of my personality. Yeah. And he said, do you want to go to pilot training? I'm like, yes. And he's like, that was the question.
Wow.
So off I went. So I traveled. This was in Hondo, Texas, right by San Antonio. And then I traveled down to Del Rio, which is, Del Rio by the sea. We call it, down along the border, across from Ciudad Acuña. And I get down there, and my buddy Joe sees me, and he's like, hey, Steve, what are you doing here?
Oh,
like, well, I'm here for pilot training. He's like, oh, you passed. I mean, he was like so surprised.
Like, wow.
And then
you?
And then I joined another, there was at pilot training, I was a distinguished graduate and did extremely well. And, that was the final one. I was like, okay, I didn't mentally make the transition, and that almost cost me everything. So I was able to leverage that experience for my eventual, 20 years later, when I got out, is like, I saw myself as a, world-class financial advisor that can explain anything in simple terms to people and put them in the right investments in accordance with their risk tolerance, and interface with people and answer questions. And I saw that. So when I started, it was not easy. Won't ever promise easy to the entrepreneurial crowd.
Not at all.
But if you can see it, then you can become it. And if you believe it, that's the battle.
Yeah, that is the battle. So, financial investments. Obviously you can do your own, and you're gambling on you, or you're making an educated decision based on the facts or indicators. How do you convince other people that, hey, let me show you how to make money?
Well, it's lately I've come across in the past year or so, is I used to think it was products and services in the world. You either sell something or you provide a service for somebody. And then I don't know who I was listening to, probably Gary Vee, if you've heard of somebody started talking about this knowledge industry, and I was like, okay, I need to think more about that. And so that's what I realized I'm actually in the knowledge industry. So similar to,
you're an educator, basically.
Yeah. And you're helping folks with things that they could probably do on their own, but they might have to dedicate like thousands of hours, into it. And they, whether it's like using a realtor or selling your home by yourself, it's like, you can do it.
Yeah, you can do it.
And you might be able to do it really well, but you have to have the time and inclination.
But my job is to do it every day. So like, you can do it part-time and whatever.
It's like I've seen the mistakes, and it's just like, so, I don't ever, when I talk to people, I don't like really sell myself. I don't actively approach people. But about the most aggressive I will get is generally it's referrals that come in. People have already said they got to work with Steve.
Mm-hmm.
But it's if I am talking to somebody, I'll be like, well, who's your financial advisor? And for the do-it-yourselfer crowd, they'll say, well, I don't have one. I'm like, actually, you do.
Mm-hmm.
And you should probably talk to them about your current situation. They're just like, what are you talking about? Like that doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, well, you are the financial advisor. So, of your own portfolio. So
Exactly.
are you on top of the markets? Do you have an opinion of what's going on? Do you, how's your track record been through previous downturns and upswings and, that sort of thing? And people are like, usually take that with the,
like, let's talk. I don't.
But I always tell folks, I'm like, hey, if you believe and want to run your own investments, just do it. Right.
Right.
Do your own thing. I totally get that. Not trying to, and if you have an advisor and you like your advisor and you have a good relationship and there's open communication,
It's working. Hey.
those things are generally more important than the 0.1% extra or whatever that, so I'm not here to cause a divorce. I go, between you and your advisor.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more out there, and the underserved clientele is what I've seen is that if you're below 5 million in net worth, you can go into JP Morgan or, Goldman Sachs or Wells Fargo, but they really, they make most of their money from that,
Just
the multimillionaire crowd. And where I kind of service is the 500 to, 2.5 million type crowd, the upper middle class that have been, working for years.
There's a bigger reach. You got the multimillionaires, billionaires. It's like 1%, maybe a smaller percentage. You don't have that many opportunities to try to convince them.
Exactly. and I came from, I was blessed. I came from middle class, beginnings, and, was able to parlay that into what I've done today. And it's just like, I can show folks how to do that or help them, get as far as they can. But it's a knowledge industry, and a lot of people are like, well, you can use a robo advisor, and I'm like, you can, of course. But I say, just like when WebMD came out a decade ago, you haven't been to a doctor since, right? And they're like, well, no, I still go. It's like, you still need a doctor, right? Yeah. Just to explain this stuff to you. But it's an amazing industry. It's much like yours. It's helping people on major career and life goals. And often in my side of the business, I have their entire net wealth, where myself and my team are responsible for that. And we take that very seriously. And to parlay it into, my past and what I've been able to do, in flying in combat. And, I say pilots are the best risk managers out there, right? Because if it goes bad, you could die today, right? So we get the risk part. Trust me,
right? Nothing as bad as that. I don't care if the market dips for 2 weeks. So
I don't freak out when there's something that turns the market upside down, or the Fed is saying this, or or whatever. Some country goes under, or a bank goes under. I can deal with all those things largely because I know what the strategy is. I know how to stick to the strategy, and I know how to talk to people when they are being emotional.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was going to ask you, what's the biggest thing that affects your customers or your clientele? And you mentioned psychologically, like in the beginning, that affects a lot of people. Is that probably the number one issue?
It is, but it doesn't really show up. It's weird. It's kind of like the average life. Folks are young and they're just trying to make some money, and they generally spend most of it. And if they're blessed to have received some mentoring or education, they might start piecing it away into a 401k early on. Right, but a lot of people don't even start till late 30s.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? And I get that, and I try to help people with that. But by the time they come to me, they either did or they didn't. So I don't, it doesn't kind of matter what happened in the past. We're just worrying about the future. And it's the folks that have saved and invested. It's when the numbers get bigger. And that's where, when you say your portfolio is down 10%, well, that, if it's 300,000, that's $30,000. And people will say, that's a car. They start making all these,
it's just a bunch of zeros on the back end.
They start relating things that can put you in an emotional tough spot.
And it brings
to where you have to, say the market's a roller coaster, but historically, unless, the world ends, it's gone up over time. Market's undefeated and coming back and setting new highs. And, markets are efficient, meaning bad businesses get killed off. Good businesses continue to move to get bigger. That's why markets can always go up, and you can take that ride if you want, but you have to stay calm. What the analogy I use is, we have these financial channels and the internet and all these notifications. I'm like, get this. So, you and I fly around the country quite a bit for volleyball. And If on an airplane, if they had a flight safety channel that was beamed right into the back of the seat in front of you, and you were sitting there watching over and over all these plane crashes and how weather can affect, you would never you would be like, get me off of this airplane right now. That's what people do in their financial world. They check into CNBC and it's media, right? People don't put on the calm voice of reasons. They put on the world is ending or the world.
I used to watch Kramer. That guy was insane. So, he was like, oh, it's
it's entertainment.
Yeah,
and there are some lessons to pick up from them, but really, it's the extremists that are on TV, and same thing with politics. To be honest, you get the extremes, and then you can lose sight of 80% is in the middle, and everything's going to be fine. So you don't need to freak out there. But
my philosophy is like, some of the things I look at is like, oh, it's a legacy move. It's going to go up and down. I don't care about that until the next 15, 20 years. I'm not going to focus on it. I'll just feed it. And I did that with crypto, and I put it into a platform, BlockFi, and then come along Sam Friedman or something like that.
SPF,
stole a lot of money, and now I'm like in bankruptcy proceedings, and I got a lot of money tied up with these bankruptcy proceedings.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I was just going to forget about it and keep feeding it, but I guess you can't do that.
There is, to your initial point of treat it as a legacy thing, and that's absolutely right. So what I advise folks is you want to do the tried and true proven stuff for at least 90% of your portfolio. Okay. Meaning your traditional best of breed blue chip companies, things you've heard of, things you touch every day, Apple, Amazon, those sorts of things that aren't going to go bankrupt.
Right.
And there's really not generally fraud involved in those. Crypto was unique because it was so attractive as a getaway from the monetary systems of the world. So, and I was into both Bitcoin and Ethereum, not by holding the individual into an account with like Coinbase or anything, but through the stock market with there's a Grayscale company that has Bitcoin Trust, Ethereum Trust. So you kind of hold it indirectly. You get to take advantage of the price swings.
Right.
But there could be some long-term uses for crypto. We just don't know. But if you get too far off of the Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, and get down into the crap coins, if you will, it's tough, right? And then dealing with institutions, that's why, one of the things we say about Ankerstar Wealth is like, look, you can trust us. And, if anything, it's a cheesy Top Gun line, but if the government trusts me with my $50 million airplane, you can trust me too.
There you go.
Right. And that's the one thing that is so destructive in the financial world is if you get involved with the wrong people, your money can either be gone or tied up or gone for long enough to where you don't know if you're going to get it back or you don't get all of it back. And lives are destroyed over stuff like that.
Yeah.
So really the time it takes to build that trust and confidence and make sure you're with somebody that's on the up and up is very important for
I guess that's why they always say diversify. Like, I guess that's why that's important,
Sorry to cut you off. Any investor out there is going to tell you to diversify. And most people are naturally diversified with, if you own a home, then that's your real estate portion of it. Some people use insurance. I don't personally, but I get it. Some people can have insurance policies that are another leg of the wealth building stool. And then the others, generally your investment, your portfolio, stocks, bonds. You can put alternatives, real estate, private equity, venture capital. It's all available to you. But really, the anchor of that is the house. It's like the portfolio could explode and, everything could be wrong, but you know what? We have the house that we live in, and whether you pay it off early or not, that's a personal choice and depends on the interest rate you get. But that's the anchor of wealth building.
It's tangible. It's the anchor.
It keeps me safe. I can see it. So that's really, if you get that right. And then of course, as you grow and build wealth, and if you want to get other, investment properties or second homes and things like that, or land, that's very attractive because you can see it.
You can see it back.
But certainly diversifying across the board is the way to go.
Good. So your company is what, 20 years strong now?
Not quite. I retired after 20 years. I'm not that old.
Okay. I'm trying to figure it out. Like, okay.
I'm 53. So I retired when I was 43 from the Air Force. So I did I went to college. So I went in at 22, retired at 43. So I did a little over 20 years and then now 10 years in. And during that path, it's gone from me working upstairs at my house, just trying to make it happen and convince my wife that this was a good idea, and that I can make this happen, to starting to hire folks a couple years ago. And now we have 3 other advisors. I have my operations manager, Candace, who's amazing, who is the glue that holds everybody together and allows me to focus on the taking care of current clients and also pursuing new ones and build the business, if you will. And then we have Allison that helps us, my social media manager, get the word out, publishing things like this and getting more exposure. And then next year I've contracted for a building. So after 10 years of working out of my house and remotely with everybody else on the team, one of my advisors in Dallas, the other one's downtown Austin, then we have one in Salt Lake City. We're finally going to have a building.
Gonna have a building. So that's your staple right there.
Well, some people, I commonly joke and say I'm going to be all grown up finally when I have a building with my name on it. But transitioning from doing investment management, which we do very well, and financial planning, which we do very well, to also do family office stuff, where the CPA for people's taxes as well as the estate lawyer are now all on the team. So when I have the building, I'm going to have those 2 individuals on the team. So it's a one-stop shop. That's really right for kind of the multimillionaire and above. But even at the 2 and 3 million, to be able to come in and meet everybody one time. Yeah. Because everybody's so busy.
You don't have to go to different buildings. You could just boom,
it's just
right
one time, everybody's talking to each other. It's really, that's kind of the next level of the business.
Nice. All right, man. I want you to you've dropped a lot of gems throughout the interview. I've caught them. Hopefully the listeners have caught the mind of an entrepreneur, the do's and don'ts and the trials and tribulations. If there was a sentence or a few things you'd like to share to an aspiring entrepreneur, what would it be? What would you tell them?
I use 3 words all the time. So when folks either ask that question or, you might see online on LinkedIn, give your best advice in 7 words or less. I generally say I don't need 7. And that's always move forward. And that's when I sign graduation gifts for kids and stuff, it's like always move forward. And, that probably doesn't resonate. They're probably looking for the cash or whatever, but in case they read it. But it really goes back to a different way of saying the point that you made earlier, which many of us that have been there, done that, realize, and that's every day there needs to be action taken to move towards your goal. Not the big goal, right? The little goal, the monthly goal. That whether you're, if you're in a business or you're selling something, you have quotas, or make some intermediate goals that you can either achieve or not. Right. That's not the point. It's that you're moving toward it every day. If you need to reset the goal, then reset the goal. But it's really, setting your alarm every day, getting out of bed, going through normal habit patterns, and, making sure that you always move forward. No day should go by where you haven't done something to work towards your dream.
Man, you can't eat the whole cookie at once. You got to take little bites.
Right. You're not going to get rich quick. You're not going to run $1 million business overnight. Yeah, there's all the pain that's involved. And it's fun. Once you realize it becomes fun.
Yeah.
You can look back on it and go, man, those are some rough years. Get getting started. Yes.
The journey is a beautiful thing. It's definitely a beautiful thing.
It really is. And that's what you smile about looking back, right? Is that, if I knew what I knew now, it'd be a lot easier. But so many people don't act because they want to, they keep researching. They keep
analysis paralysis.
Yeah. It's like, I didn't know any of that stuff. And I just moved forward.
Man, that's a common theme. It's just kind of like, I'm the kind of guy that, hey, you put me on the ledge, I'm just going to jump. I think I'm prepared, but I'm going to gamble on me. I'm just going to take the chance.
Yeah, figure it out.
Yeah, figure it out. Figure it out while I'm in there and I'm falling fast. I'll figure it out.
That's right.
Well, hey, Steve, man, where can people find you if they want to find out more financial advice or figure out how they could even sit down and get a cup of coffee with you?
Yeah, you bet. Would love to. And, I have a unique last name. So you hit Ankerstar up on the internet and you're going to find anything from podcast to our actual website, stuff like that. But AnkerstarWealth.com is the website. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Cruiser's my call sign from all of us from the aviation world. Have them. So Cruiser Ankerstar or the Ankerstar Wealth Facebook page. But for folks that are out there, budding entrepreneurs, do your thing, make your dream happen. And, then all your money and effort is going to go towards that. At some point, though, you need to take care of your future self. Nice. So particularly to the Boss Up listeners is, do your thing. once you've gotten there, or once you've made this steady flow of revenue, that's when you need to go back and look for some unique opportunities. With entrepreneurs, there's a couple different ones that are kind of, you don't have a 401k normally.
You don't.
So SEP IRA, Simple IRA, there's things that would be happy to, I'd buy you the cup of coffee to get you on the right path with things.
Good deal. Well, hey, thanks again, Steve Ankerstar, Andre Key. Hey, and remember, just move forward. And I like what you said. Take care of your older self. So many times people don't think that far in advance. And especially as an entrepreneur, sometimes you have those blinders on and you're caught on your vision. But at some point, if you're blessed, we're all going to get old. And I'm trying to train my daughter, but I don't know. I probably need some nurses. I need to be prepared for that time. But I mean, again, thank you. I appreciate Wes, my producer. Thank you to all the listeners. And it's a wrap.